Hi, this is Ryan with Mike and Technologies, back with another DocuWare video. Today we're going to take a look at building out import configurations for a folder import into DocuWare. So what I mean by that is we're gonna take two different invoice types. We're going to drop them into the exact same folder, and then we're going to see how DocuWare imports those invoices into DocuWare directly into our accounting file cabinet with both invoices completely indexed. So in DocuWare, you want to make sure that you have your file cabinet set up. So for this demo, I set up one called 2025 Accounting since we're using invoices. And then I've also identified what index fields I want in my cabinet. So that's always going to be step one. Make sure that your file cabinet is created first, and then make sure that your invoice or your fields are also identified. So for this accounting cabinet, it's very simple. I just want my company, date, contact info, invoice number, um, amount, stuff like that. So first step we want, other than building out our cabinet, is we want to go to our configurations. So if you drop down, go to your configurations panel, and then from here, once this loads, we want to go to document processing. So this is going to show me a list of my current configurations in the system, and then it's going to allow me to create new ones as well. So what I want to do is go to new configuration, and I can bring up the documents that we're going to be storing. So I have a couple samples here. So one thing we're going to be storing here is this invoice for electronic supply, and then we're also going to be storing another one from Pete Parts House. So two different invoice types from two different companies. They're both going to be going into the same folder. So let's set up the first configuration for this one, electronic supply. So let's call this electronics supply AP demo. And whenever you build out a new configuration, you have three options. You can use a scanner, folder, or printer configuration. So pretty self-explanatory. For scanners, this is for physical paperwork. If you're going to be scanning in anything like a paper invoice, you can set up a template to grab that. We're going to be using the folder import, so that means we're going to drop digital documents directly into a watch folder. And we can also choose a printer configuration. So this means I can bring up my invoice and I can choose to use DocuWare Printer to print it directly into DocuWare. We're going to be using a folder import for this demo here. And then what we want to do is set up our sample document. So you can click and drag, or you can go to your file system and look for it that way. I'm just going to click and drag this one over. Alright, so DocuWare's got that set up now. I also want to make sure select configuration automatically as specified on processing is also checked. This is going to allow us to throw several different document types into the exact same import folder. Excuse me. And then down here under file types, we can choose PDF files only or all file types. So if you have images, other file types, you can also use those as long as this is checked. There are more options down here. So you can use a scheduler, custom text configurations, and barcodes. So that's going to be down here at the bottom of your main source tab. And then we're going to go to our target tab. So this is where we choose our target. So what I want for this is for this invoice to go directly into my cabinet. So it's going into my 2025 accounting cabinet. And then if we go over to our processing tab here, this is where we're going to identify our different index values. So three different areas. On the left hand side we have our tools. In the center we're going to have our document. You can resize this as well, zoom in and out. And then on the right hand side we have our index values. So we're storing this into our accounting cabinet. What I want for my document type, I'm just going to put in a fixed entry of invoice in. So I know this is always going to be an invoice, so I can just hard code that directly into my configuration. And then I can grab my company name. So what I want to do is click on my text tool, and I want to draw a readout area around the text on the document. That's going to give me this arrow, which I can click and drag and point directly into my index value. It also helps to set up anchors. Now, this is a digital document. I don't anticipate the text areas on the document to be shifting around. But if they do shift around, you can set up anchors. So this is going to tell DocuWare, hey, anytime you see invoice, look directly under that for my company name. And then what we want to do is set up our anchor. So I'm have this pointed to invoice, and I did that by clicking on the pencil tool and setting up my anchor. And then we have our date. So again, I'm going to click on my text tool, draw a readout area around my date, and then point that to the index value. And then I can set up another anchor as well so that DocuWare always knows where this information is on the document. And then I'm going to grab the invoice number, point that to my field. I can even have this pointed at date as well. We have our contact, Mike Brown, so I'm going to grab him. Let's see, where's contact? There we go. Might as well just set up another anchor, so I'll set one up around salesperson. And if I scroll down, I can see I have my total here at the bottom, so I'm going to grab that and point that to amount. And then I'll go ahead and set up another anchor around total. And then for status, so if we're going to build in any workflows, it helps to have a status on the document. So anytime this invoice is coming into the system, it's going to have a status of new. And this is going to allow me to route this invoice to whoever in the company needs to approve or reject the invoice. So if I set this as a status of new, I can create a workflow that, for example, sends an email notification to a specific user anytime a new invoice enters the DocuWare system. They can get that invoice, they can get that email, click on a link in the email, which takes them directly to the document, and then they can take a stamp, a digital stamp, and stamp it approved or rejected. And then from there, you can change the status to approved or rejected and have it route to another individual. Everything else here looks good. I'm not going to worry about customer ID, email, or subject, or document number, or project. So we're done with our indexing tab. Now, if we jump down to identification, we do need to set up an identifier on the document that tells DocuWare which configuration it's going to pull whenever this document goes into my system. So I'm going to set up an identifier on this document. I'm going to tell DocuWare to look for electronic supply in the top left-hand corner. So when I drew my identification readout area around this text area on the bottom right-hand side here, you can see my readout area. So I'm just going to put that I want this to contain the company name. So anytime DocuWare sees electronic supply in the company name, it knows to bring this document in and use this specific configuration. And if I jump down to my splitting here, I can also choose to split the document. So if I have a stack of invoices coming into the system, I can, for example, choose to split it at the bottom if it's at page 1 of 2 or 2 of 2. I could split it before or after that area or that identifying text area. Or I can also choose to split it at the bottom of the document. If I know that this is always going to be the bottom of the last page of the document, I can choose to split it before or after the page. So this all looks good. I'm going to go ahead and save it. Now, if we're going to be setting this up for multiple people to use, you'd go to your permissions tab and make sure that you can add your users, roles, users or roles to this configuration so that they can use it. So we have our first one set up here. We're going to set up our second one now for Pete Parts House. So again, I'm going to go to New Configuration. I'm going to call this Pete Parts House AP Demo. Again, this is going to be a folder import. And then we're going to bring our document into the configuration. Okay. So again, I want select configuration automatically as specified on processing. And then just like the other configuration, we're going to choose our target. And then we're going to start indexing our document. So document type, I'm going to hard code invoice in for this one as well. I have my company name. We'll go ahead and set an anchor around this as well. Okay, I have my date, and I have my invoice number. And we'll go ahead and set an anchor around invoice. Maybe not. Let's do this one up here. And we'll set this one as well. Okay, so we do have a contact, Joe, here. We're going to give him that. Set up an anchor. And let's see, what else do we want? Let's grab the amount. We'll go ahead and set an anchor up for this as well. All right. So I have identified what I want to capture off this specific invoice. So if I jump down to identification, again, just like the other document, we do need an identifier. So I'm going to set up Pete Parts House as my identifier here. So if this area equals Pete Part House, and then we'll go ahead and set an anchor up as well. And then if we're going to split this document, we can set up splitting, but we're going to make believe that this is always going to be a single page document. So I'm just going to hit save. And then just like the other one, if you need to add any users or roles to this configuration, you do that on the permissions tab here. So now that we have our two templates set up, what we can do now is set up our import job. So one thing you want to do is set up the folder. So if this is a watch folder, you can set this up on a server or a workstation somewhere and even share it out. For this demo, I set up a simple new folder locally here on my computer called DocuWare Import. There's nothing in this folder at the moment. It's just a plain folder. And then what we want to do is go to our DocuWare desktop apps. So DocuWare desktop apps gets installed on a server or a workstation. I'll make another video for that. But once you get this installed on your computer, you're going to have this dialog box here. And then you want to go to your import tab and then click on create new import job. So I'm going to call this AP incoming. And then we want to point this to our source folder. So this is going to be a folder that DocuWare is going to be watching for these incoming invoices. So my folder is called DocuWare Import. You can see there I have my path. And then for the configuration, what we want is automatic identification. This means we can choose multiple templates to use for this same folder. If we wanted to narrow this down to just a single template to be used for this specific folder, I could choose that template from my drop-down list here. So for example, electronic supply AP demo, that initial configuration we set up, I could just limit this folder just looking at that configuration, but we're going to open this up to any configuration. So automatic identification, and then just for best practice, I always make sure that these are checked at the bottom. And then we hit save. So that's all we need to do. We have our templates set up. We have our import job set up. If I go back to DocuWare, go to my cabinet here, and I hit search, at the moment there's nothing in my cabinet. So this is an empty cabinet. So what we can do at this point, I'm going to open up my import folder, and I'm simply just going to copy in my two invoices that we set up. So Pete and electronic supply, I'm going to copy those, and I'm just going to place them into this folder here. And DocuWare is going to watch this folder. It grabbed those two invoices, and you can see here in my DocuWare desktop apps, DocuWare went through and started indexing and storing these two documents. So if I go to my history here, I can see they were both successful. Now if I go back to DocuWare and I refresh my cabinet, you can see I have both invoices now sitting in my cabinet. So here I have my electronic supply invoice, and here I have my Pete's Part House invoice. If I scroll over here, you can see it went through indexed this document. So it grabbed my company name, grabbed the date, grabbed the contact, grabbed the invoice number. I forgot to add a status of new in the other one, but you'd want that hard-coded in there as well. And then it grabbed the amount as well. So that's how you set up a configuration, quick and easy. You can also set these up for printing and scanning into DocuWare as well. So for example, if I were to go back and set up a printer template for one of these invoices, what I would do in that case is simply just copy the configuration rather than having to rebuild it from scratch. I would rename this something like print, and then toggle over to my print tab and then hit save. That way I don't have to re-import the document or re-index the document. Now I have that document set up, so if I go to this document here, I can go to my printer and I can choose to print this into DocuWare directly. Just another method of getting those in. I'll make a few other videos about some of the other import methods, such as connect to mail, connect to Outlook, stuff like that. But that's it for now. Hopefully you learned a little bit, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thanks.